Okay, so this is our first Patreon question and answer session. This is Tanya behind the camera. She's going to um, be asking the questions that people have posed on Patreon. So let's do it.
Okay, so the first question we have here is Sergeev, sorry if I mispronounced that, asks, how do you or would you recommend going through this materialistic world without being depressed or confused, since you know this isn't what it's supposed to be like? Can you create a balance while trying to achieve samadhi?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this idea of Maya and the Matrix, being something that's bad, something that we have to fix. There may be an impulse to fix the external world, but that's not what meditation is about. What we're doing here is we're finding what it is within ourselves that we're identified with in relation to the outer world. So it's not about like that when you say that we know it shouldn't be a certain way. How do you know it shouldn't be a certain way? Maybe the friction that's happening in the world right now, the transformations that are happening, maybe that's exactly what has to happen. So it's not about, there could be like a beautiful poetry to what's happening in the world today. So it's not about labeling the matrix or the outer world as something that's bad, that needs to be fixed. The depression, the feelings that you're having inside about the world, that it's, if you have a complete experience of those feelings, then there's no residue left. There's no sankhara. So maybe, if you're feeling bad, you're feeling depressed about the state of the world, that's the friction that is necessary for transformation. Like that's what's opening you, actually. So maybe like they say in the Hermetic teachings, the way in is the way out. The way out is the way in. So it's not about getting rid of your pain. It's not getting rid of anything. It's actually learning who is engaged in this struggle, who is resisting the world as it is right now. And when you recognize that part of yourself that is, it's not about condoning the world. I'm not talking about saying, okay, we're just going to, allow the world to be, continue pursuing money, continue pursuing all these egoic interests. It's not about that. It's about identifying the resistance inside of you that is keeping you from your own development, keeping you from your own evolution. And once you free that energy inside yourself, you change yourself, and then you're in a fit position to make changes in the outer world. It's like you're recognizing who is creating the reflection in the mirror. So you're not trying to change the outer reflection, you're actually recognizing who is creating that reflection. And then eventually, as Tolstoy said, it's about changing yourself. Learn to change yourself, and that will make the difference in the outer world.
Awesome. And so next, Susie has a question. What do you think about the fact that we use our minds to understand how not to use our minds? The mind gets dissed a lot in spirituality discussions, but can it be good when it becomes a servant to the soul or source instead of its master? Mm-hmm. That's a really good question too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and the answer is in the question. you know, yes, like when the mind becomes the servant rather than what is in control, um, you know, then, you know, the question is, who is the master? You know, who is it that is behind the mind, that can observe the mind? You know, when we're doing meditation, or we're doing self-inquiry or looking at our lives, who is it that is aware of the patterns? Who's aware of the thinking process? So, you know, because there's a part of us that's able to observe those things. So whatever's observing it is not it. It's apart from it. So so I think the key in our own development is to learn to recognize that part of ourself, because everything is mind. The world is all, you know, everything that we're experiencing in this reality is taken in through the senses, and filtered through the mind. So it's not about getting rid of that. You know, we're here to experience this material reality. So the problem happens, suffering happens when we become identified with any particular phenomena that's coming through the senses or the mind. So so really, you know, this leads to the real, you know, the ultimate purpose of meditation is to recognize what is beyond the thinking mind, so the immanent self. And that's what we're doing in the meditation. That's the purpose of the meditation. So I can't tell you what that is, because it's you know, it's not my words. It's your own deep inquiry into who you are, that will lead to that answer. And it's not an answer for the mind. You are the answer. That part of you, the immanent you, is the answer.
And so the next question I feel like might be a little bit related, from Finn.
Mm-hmm.
That the question is it important to always have the goal of meditation, for example, awareness of the breath or Vipassana meditation, formulated in your mind, and then again, like an example, to come out of suffering, to see reality as it is, or to gain wisdom, etc.? Because sometimes when I sit down for meditation, I'm so confused, but I can concentrate well, and I don't know what I actually want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so when we meditate, you know, like say your meditation object is the breath. The meditation object changes through time. So, you know, you really, you don't want to be, you know, rigidly locked in to, you know, focusing narrowly on a meditation object for your entire meditation. It might be helpful at the beginning to focus on the mind or focus on the breath, and you know, you may have to concentrate. If the mind is really busy generating a lot of thoughts, then it's great to have that anchor to anchor you in the moment. But if you keep, you know, if you have this rigid sort of attachment to always staying on the breath, and it's like you're repeating this thing in your mind, you know, I've got to stay on the breath, then that's like a little conditioned program running in your mind, and ultimately that's not meditation. These techniques that we're doing, these meditation objects that we give in the meditation, they're just stepping stones. So ultimately, you want to come to a place where the mind isn't engaged. You want to come to stillness. And if you are rigidly attached to some practice or some meditation object, then your mind will never come to stillness. And is there another part to that? Did I miss?
No, no, and I think it might be neat to tie it into the previous question a bit about
Mm-hmm.
the kind of like what you kind of alluded to, the chronology of kind of using the mind as our servant,
Mm-hmm.
and then to get beyond,
Yeah,
like how that kind of can unfold
yeah,
in
yeah,
meditation.
yeah. So, yeah, I think you know, the mind is, it can be a useful tool. Like we're using the mind to go beyond the mind, basically. So like the mind can understand its own limitations. So this, I think this is the key in this answer is the mind, you know, the greatest thing that the mind can realize is its own limitations with regard to meditation. So if it understands that, you know, it has to become kind of like a candle that burns itself up. So, you know, so this process of inner investigation and, you know, focusing on the breath, it's like we're using less and less mind continuously. So we're going to subtler and subtler practices. So we may start with the gross breath, then, you know, it may just be just the meditation object naturally changes. So you just, all you have to do is focus on the meditation object, and if you surrender and stay present with it, it will change. So the breath may become just more like this more fluid sense of expansion and contraction, or, you know, this pranic pulse that starts to happen, which is subtler. So you go from the gross to subtle, and then you stay with that pranic pulse, and that may get even subtler. You may end up just being aware of awareness itself. You know, just watching the watcher, and so you're over time, you know, like the candle that burns itself up. Eventually, it's burning. You're working with this technique and this process, and then it's gone at a certain point, and you don't make anything happen. It just happens. It's like it's sort of used itself up, or it's just, you know, at a certain point in meditation, it just, there's stillness, and always there's a counterpart with that stillness of energy as well. Like the energy that was going into the conditioned patterns, into the mind, becomes freed to be experienced in the moment. And so the energy is building, and then at a certain point, it builds to a certain point, and there's a change. There's just a collapse of whatever was happening, and this subject-object duality sometimes can be a part of that, and different aspects. There, in Buddhism, they talk about the jhanas, states of absorption, and with each level of dropping, or each level of mind that becomes still, there's an increase in energy, and there's a subjective perception of stillness at the same time. So
So I actually have a question from what you just said. So can you talk about then kind of the reverse, that by coming out of that? So when you're meditating and you get to that point when basically the mind, you can say the subtler, you become aware of awareness itself, or maybe not even that, complete, you know, samadhi state. And then can you talk a bit about how then that then comes back to mind, like how your mind comes back online, and what that is like, that transition?
Yeah, so I think it's really, that's a great question. It's really important when we do have these dropping away experiences, or awakening experiences, or samadhi experiences. The union that happens, it can be quite blissful, quite peaceful, and often that itself can become an attachment. So there has to be, unless we have you know, an incredible kind of karmic thing around meditation. We're always going to lose. When we experience samadhi, we will come out of it unless we're a Buddha, unless we're fully enlightened. So, so for me, and most people who are doing a lot of meditation, samadhi state will come and go, hundreds of times. Like we'll go into it and come out of it, and so the feeling around that, the equanimity around that coming and going of that union is really key to the more we can just let it go, the more we'll get it back, more quickly we'll get it back, because it's that equanimity, that non-attachment to any state of consciousness that is the bigger samadhi. They say the samadhi that comes and goes is not the true samadhi. So the true samadhi, the one that is all-encompassing, which is the immanent self, which is, it doesn't come and go. It's always there. It's always obscured by some level of mind. So it's like the mind is like clouds coming and going. So it seems like it disappears. It seems like the samadhi is gone, or the immanent self is lost. But nothing is lost. It's just that the mind, the clouds come back and obscured the sun. So from the perspective of the self, the little self that we identify with, it's like something is lost, but it's not really lost. So whenever we can just be equanimous with what is, just really surrender to the reality of what is. So the mind starts to come back, thoughts start to come back. If we're just equanimous with that equanimity is that immanent self. That's all the immanent self is. It's just a natural spaciousness or allowing of what is. So it allows phenomena to come and go without preference.
Okay, and the last question I thought we could answer today was submitted by Trish, and she says that her question is a technical one. I haven't come across you referring to eyes open or eyes closed in your guided samadhi meditations. I've heard differing views, but understand the value of open eyes to assist in staying present, particularly with mindfulness meditations. Would you recommend eyes open for the samadhi meditations?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think there are times when eyes open are useful, and there are times when eyes closed are useful. In the different traditions, usually, like in the Vipassana tradition, a lot of traditional meditation, they have eyes closed. And I think at the beginning, it's probably better to have your eyes closed, just because we tend to get more distracted. And at the Samadhi Center, when we do our meditation retreats, usually it's we'll use eyes closed, and sometimes we'll even give out mindfolds, or things to go over the eyes, just to cultivate a sense of really going inward. And people find that when there's just darkness, or just no visual phenomena at all, they can start to sink deeper, and I think it can be very conducive to coming to stillness. But that being said, ultimately the purpose of meditation is to realize our true self beyond name and form, which is not contingent on whether we have our eyes open or closed. We're, what we are. we're filtering reality through these senses. So as I would say, a more advanced form of meditation, they do this in Zazen, is just having the eyes partly open, just maybe defocused a little bit. Some of the yogic traditions, they'll defocus the eyes, and attention may naturally start to rest at the third eye as well. So if you keep the eyes open, it's more of a bridge to the outer world, and ultimately we want to be meditating, or we want to be in a state of presence in every aspect of life. So I would say having your eyes open is in the meditation, just partly open. It's a nice bridge or a transition to living your life in a more meditative state. I would also say that in general, like if you have your eyes closed, over time, like if you're doing a lot of meditation, you may start to get more sleepy. So it can be beneficial to just open your eyes a bit, to just bring more energy. It can bring more of an aliveness in the meditation, and that can be helpful sometimes. And also, if you are meditating with your eyes open, the opposite is true. Sometimes we can get a little overstimulated when the eyes are open, or we start tuning into what's going on in the room, and that might be an opportunity to close your eyes and go deeper into the meditation itself.
So I've noticed when we meditate in the same space that you usually have your eyes closed. Mm-hmm. You've been meditating for about 20 years or so, right? So yeah. That's just something that you do. And one question I'm just curious about, because I know you've had samadhi experiences, scattered throughout your, mm-hmm. Your history in meditating, is have you ever experienced a samadhi experience with your eyes open?
Mm-hmm. Yes, like definitely. So for me, I've had experiences where it's like the mind will just become still, with the eyes open, and and even walking around the samadhi, that union, that sort of sense that that I am whatever it is that this world is. We're interacting with the world. If I am in that state, I get up and walk around. It's like I am stillness walking around. It's literally the whatever it is that I am is moving through stillness, but that stillness is this world at the same time. And it's, to the mind, it really, that sounds kind of nonsensical, but it literally is true. There's an actual collapse or something that happens, but it's not really a something. It's actually nothing that happens. It's all the happening that's happening in the brain, in the mind, ceases. There's an actual cessation of the activities of the self. And that, it literally is not contingent on whether our eyes are open or closed. So.
And so do I gather that to get yourself into that state, you were maybe doing a more formal meditation, like eyes closed, seated cushion practice, mm-hmm. but once you kind of got it, you were able at that point to kind of carry it then off the cushion? Is that what happened? Or did you meditate with your eyes open and moving?
It's happened both ways. Oh, okay. And there's no, getting myself into that state, because there's no, this is the thing, like beginner's mind is so important in meditation. So, I can't say there's any formula to this. Like what happens in a samadhi experience, it's always new. It's always, there's no, if I have any idea of how to make it happen, or so it's, usually that has to be dropped at some point. So
Yeah, it was more like, if you go to a 10-day retreat, you're maybe more
Mhm.
likely to, experience a samadhi state than
Yeah.
if you drove to Toronto and, you know,
Mhm.
went shopping and went to Canada's Wonderland roller coaster.
Mhm.
And I don't know, but
Well,
I'm just saying that's why, like
yeah.
sometimes during retreat, it kind of, I don't know, maybe there's a cumulative effect or like a accelerated kind of, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like the environment, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a good point. So one of the things I like saying sometimes is that that the actual union or the actual experience of samadhi, it's like it happens by accident, but we create the conditions for those accidents to happen. So it's like we're not, the mind is powerless because it's the obstacle. It's what it needs to die, basically. It needs to surrender. It needs to become the servant. So I would say, the meditation retreats that we're doing, we're creating the conditions and hopefully the optimal conditions for samadhi to arise. But ultimately, it's not my will. It's higher will.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Those are awesome questions. Good discussion. I enjoyed that.
Yeah,
So
I
we'll
appreciate. So yeah, thank you for the questions. And if people have more questions, this is new. This is our first question and answer, and I'm happy to continue. So thank you.